Really excited now to bring in Bryce Koon from the Crowded Booth, who was on campus at SMU this weekend. Bryce, it was great to see you first and foremost. I know we didn't get too much time with the wildness of the weather on the field before game, and then of course, what ultimately unfolded, which was a great matchup between SMU and Miami. Miami falls 26-22 Miami in overtime.
Yeah, well, Billy, first off, appreciate you having me on and the hospitality from the folks out in Dallas. Man, talk about a weather switch, right? Like that was something that was crazy. We get there mid 50s, raining, a little misty, and then by the end of it, it's a beautiful Saturday fall afternoon. But yeah, no, what an atmosphere. My first game out there at Gerald J. Ford Stadium, the celebrities were out and about, and it was I think everything you would want in a big time ACC matchup. And hey, SMU fans left happy and took a little bit longer probably to get to their cars and back to their respective places of residence. But man, they were excited, and it was just an awesome atmosphere.
And for this SMU team, obviously a huge win coming off of the loss and the letdown at Wake Forest, which kind of put a damper on everything. The rain, I thought, was kind of poetic the way everybody was feeling maybe in the morning, still dwelling a little bit, at least out on the boulevard, about that Wake Forest loss. But SMU came out and got a couple first downs. They were able to at least kind of weather the storm, so to speak, against Miami.
Mm-hmm.
But Miami still was able to make this one a game where SMU wasn't necessarily playing full-blown catch-up, but it was a game that you felt like SMU was just kind of hanging in there. And then in the second half, I really felt like it was a switch. Like SMU controlled that second half for the most part and was able to take control into overtime. And then, even though Miami was driving, they were able to get a huge play. Ahmad Moses' second interception of the game. It was just a really good football game.
Yeah, I think the two big things that SMU did a really good job of was I thought they did a good job spreading the field offensively, hitting some shot plays down the field, and it didn't allow Miami to just play, hey, load up the box and let's just make Kevin beat us deep. I mean, that was one of the biggest things that he did, and he made some plays, and I think that was just a big thing for them to open up the offense. And then, Billy, I mean, you would know better than me following this team week in and week out. I just thought that the interior of the defensive line, the front seven, stepped it up a notch in that second half. Miami's offensive line came into the season. Look, you got a potential first-round draft pick, maybe top 15, top 20 pick on that offensive line, but they came into this game and you kind of just sat there and said, hey, look, Miami is who they are. They've got some backs that can do some damage. Beck ran the ball a little bit more than I thought he would in this game, but I just thought that second half, whatever the adjustments were made, it clicked for SMU right out of the gate, and both offensively and defensively. So I think it's a hats off to the coaching staff. And I think, guys executed, but Billy, I would say that, Rhett Lashley and company, I think they out-schemed and out-coached Miami very well in that second half.
They did, and I felt like, watching this game unfold, it was really one where, Kevin Jennings was hobbled at one point, came out for a couple plays. I thought, looking at his reaction coming out of that game, I thought that was it. I thought his ankle had kind of finally gave out, and he was not going to be able to return. But, man, whatever he does as far as stretching it out and getting it, re-loose, he was able to capitalize on getting back into the game. He scored on a rushing touchdown. And he was just on career high 365 yards. And if not for, two drops come to mind, but there were three that really, overall, there were two that I felt like impacted the game. Like SMU really could have probably put up 30 in regulation. They had the one on the sideline to RJ Maryland, which was perfectly placed. That was a drop. Then you had TJ Harden on third down, drop one where he was the only guy out there for about 15 yards. And that one would have taken off and given Kevin 400 yards passing, so what the changes that they did, even though they weren't running the ball in regulation really well, they were able to turn around in overtime and get on the ground and power it through. They win on a TJ Harden walk-off touchdown. That was the biggest, I think, mentality change that I've seen from SMU within a game during the course of a season, because it was not going well offensively on the ground, and they come out in overtime. And I felt like once Ahmad obviously got that interception, the offense said, you know what, we're not going to let this be like the Baylor game where things did not go SMU's way in overtime. Let's ground and pound. Let's take advantage of this opportunity and finish. And they did.
Yeah, Billy, if I'm not mistaken, they didn't throw the ball once on that overtime drive. I think it
Yep.
was all runs consecutively, and that says something about what I was mentioning earlier about. Look, Miami on paper might have been the more talented team. I don't think a lot of people would dispute that in terms of the star rankings and potential NFL caliber players. I mean, they have that, but when push comes to shove, SMU I thought put their hand in the ground and they leaned on them in that overtime drive. I mean, it was just impressive to see the push they were getting off the ball. I just thought that. I, I thought in that overtime period when Carson Beck threw the interception, and I was joking with some people, and I know, look, I mean, people have got their jokes about Carson Beck in terms of what he is, but truthfully, I mean, this Miami team, if you allow them, they will make a mistake, and I don't think that's just a product of this season. I think this is maybe a characteristic of a Mario Cristobal program. Like they just tend to make a mistake if you allow them, and so Beck throws the interception, and then you get into a point where I like how you said it. I mean, SMU's like, hey, we're not gonna be a repeat offender here. I mean, this is going to be different, and so just a total flip, I think, after halftime of what they wanted to do, how they executed, and look, man, and you know this better than anyone else. It keeps those postseason hopes alive, and there's going to be respectively some really good games. But I'll tell you one thing: that matchup against Louisville means something entirely different here in a couple of weeks out in Dallas.
No question about it. And that is what's exciting for SMU fans. They were super down in the dumps, and now it's Miami fans that are in their usual spot in November, which is down in the dumps. Mario Cristobal drops to 4-9 overall in November. Rhett Lashley improves to 12-1, fresh off his new deal too. That makes him one of the highest paid coaches in college football. A big deal for SMU to get this one with Rhett coming off that extension, get back on track. You couldn't write a better script as far as how to bounce back and how to win it and the field rush and all of those things. But SMU is just a team that finds a way in November. And I don't know what the secret sauce is in Dallas for that, but they've been able to find those ways. So now if they can go on the road, Boston College, red bandana game this weekend, just get out of there with a win. BC's kind of starting to play teams a little tougher. That Notre Dame game was tight, which, we'll talk about a little bit, but for SMU, they ultimately will then get a bye, and then they'll face Louisville, and then they'll have to go all the way out to Cal, which could be a little spooky. Just ask Virginia how close that was. But you look at this ACC championship race; it's now kind of been thrown into utter chaos because team that well, Georgia Tech, did not take care of business against NC State. And look, last week on the show, so 2 weeks ago, I said, Georgia Tech, this is the Syracuse game. This is dicey. I see this one being really close. Georgia Tech pulls away. They blow them out. Then I gave Georgia Tech their flowers, and I said, you know what? Prove me wrong a little bit on that. Maybe they take care of business and roll past NC State on this one and kind of blow them out. Not the case. CJ Bailey looks like a stud that he is. I think he needs a little bit more help around him, but that's another story. But Georgia Tech just couldn't overcome what NC State had going, and despite 400 yards passing from Haynes King, they fall 48-36.
Yeah, I'm going to be talking about this a little bit later on my show, but I think the big key in that game was, and you mentioned this, CJ Bailey did that without some of his really good help. I mean, Hollywood Smothers is a dude in that backfield for NC State, was not available in this game. So when you look and see kind of the recipe for an upset, I've been saying this for quite a while, and I know that, to the average college football fan, they might look at Dave Doran and say, okay, yeah, he's been okay. But you're talking about an NC State program that doesn't have, an elite track record of success. But he has them, to me, as one of the more stable programs in the country. Like they've had some down years. They've had some years where they've almost made it to Charlotte for the ACC title. But, just an underrated coach, came by way of Northern Illinois. I believe it was back-to-back MAC titles before he took, the job at NC State. And he's got a quarterback in CJ Bailey that I think when you're a program like NC State and you're having to get a good eval out of high school, Bailey is a guy that you push your chips in on. And you say, if this kid develops, he's the one who can take us pretty far. And, I think NC State's just a team that, Carter Finley Stadium is kind of an underrated atmosphere to play in too. Like they were rocking. And, on the other side for Georgia Tech, I think you and I talked about this the week of the Syracuse game. For Georgia Tech in this game, for me, this was a sense of you haven't played anybody who could really spread the field on you. And that to me was always the big worry. Like offensively, I felt comfortable about Buster Faulkner, Chris Winkie leading the charge, and Haynes King. Like you feel good there. They're going to give us a chance to win. But look, you got Blake Gideon, the new defensive coordinator. I think he's done a good job, but you haven't played anyone who could really pass the ball on you. And Bailey just hit you from all different avenues. And you saw, I think this Georgia Tech defense was kind of reeling a little bit early on. And they just never found their footing. And to the credit, I had a couple texts from some buddies who are Tech fans and some Tech donors. They said, "So is this what it was like to cover?" And I'm going to use it loosely, Jaden Daniels in 2023. You got a quarterback putting up nearly 500 yards of offense, but your defense couldn't get a stop. And I said, well, Jaden's a special breed, but to the same feeling, like you knew you had to score every time. And Georgia Tech blinked offensively, which happens. And I guess I come out of this game, Billy, wondering, NC State has a weird resume, I would say, like in terms of their list. They've got the win over Virginia, I believe, and then they've got the win over, obviously Georgia Tech now too. But for Georgia Tech, it's, can you right the ship? They're going to play Boston College after SMU does, but they got a game against Pitt at home. And that to me is where it gets kind of dicey. But you take a look at that NC State schedule. I mean, it's weird. They've what is it? Miami, Florida State, North Carolina. I mean, look, the ACC race is crazy. I think NC State's a really, really good team. But in terms of Georgia Tech, you've got to right the ship because you've got two teams left on your schedule if you're Brent Key that can throw the ball and hit you from different ways. You've got, obviously, the non-conference matchup last game of the season against Georgia, but you got that Pitt team that looked completely revitalized after the quarterback switch. And a guy I know pretty well, Cade Bell, their offensive coordinator, he and I were down in Valdosta, Georgia together when he was under his dad, Kerwin Bell, who's now the head coach of Western Carolina. But yeah, it's man, I know, Billy, I guess you're still technically new to the ACC. We used to have coastal chaos. Now It's just complete chaos in the ACC.
CJ Bailey versus Kevin Jennings. Who do you like? This is a great question. It's both players are super talented and come from big programs in big cities. Kevin obviously being from Dallas, CJ Bailey being from the Miami area, and a talent-laden roster down there when he came out. I believe there's a little bit of an age difference here. I think CJ is a couple years younger. So for him to be doing what he's doing is very impressive. Both, I think, just are really, really good players as a whole. That I think, to your point, you talked about Dave Dorian. NC State has got to find a way to really take that next step as far as building around CJ Bailey. They have some of the studs. Jaden Scott went off against Georgia Tech, but you just need to find him a little bit more help out there for him to reach his next level of consistency. NC State sitting overall in the year 5-4, 2-3. I mean, not really ideal with, I think, the talent that they have over there, but a really, really good starting quarterback that as long as they hang on to him, they're going to have a chance in just about every game. And both players really showed that this weekend.
To that point, Billy, I really think it's the frustration for NC State fans last year. I mean, you had Grayson McCall that you brought in.
Yeah.
Terrible situation with him getting hurt, but you had KC Concepcion on that team. You had a guy defensively that I get to watch every Saturday, and Tamarcus Cooley. I mean, they had a really good team that I think just underachieved, and Bailey wasn't quite ready to step in. Yep. And for people watching, I encourage them, go watch the NC State-Georgia Tech game last year where NC State almost knocked off Georgia Tech in Atlanta. It was really Bailey's kind of coming out party where I think a lot of people are like, man, he's raw, but he has all the tools. And I'll shout out our mutual friend, not to poke fun at the ACC, but Matthew Bruni, he's dying to see CJ Bailey in an LSU uniform next year. So that's who he wants the transferred quarterback to be. But to your point, I mean, now, Bailey, I don't want to say he's necessarily a known commodity, but he's getting his tape out there. He's having the full season as a starter. That's going to be the pivotal point for that collective and that rev share over in Raleigh. Can you keep him in the fold and then convince guys to come play with him? Because, like I said, I like Dave Doran. I think they do a great job. The one knock has been you can't make it to Charlotte. That's one thing. One of the longest tenured head coaches in the ACC, I believe, right underneath Dabo Swinney. So we'll see what happens. NC State's a fun program. I saw someone, that same person, 310 in UK, said perhaps we can see in the 2026 ACC championship game, Bailey versus Jennings would be quite the show for a conference championship game. That's for sure.
No doubt about it. And Bryce, before we get you out of here, what is Georgia Tech now have to do as far as turning the page here, because this is a loss that really just one. It hurts the ACC, especially with Miami doing what truthfully Miami normally does. So it's not uber surprising, but you thought maybe Miami was kind of past that. But for Georgia Tech, this is such a special season, but they can't let it be wasted on one loss that just makes it more difficult for them to make it to Charlotte. Now they've got to find a way here to rally, and of course they'll lean on Haynes King for that, but their defense has to have a gut check here as well.
Yeah, they've got to get healthy. Amari Harvey, their starting cornerback, not playing in this game. Jai Gilmore, transferred from Georgia State, who is, I would say, just a pretty solid high floor player for them. They missed that. They had a true freshman, Tay Harris, taking some significant snaps at safety. Really good football player. But Billy, like as well as I do covering recruiting, it's just a big jump. When you put a guy into the fray starting, that's just a lot for them to take in. So I think going forward, mentioning you get to reset with the bye week. You're going to play Boston College up there. That's just a weird game because Boston College is playing way more competitively than they were a month ago, maybe even 3 or 4 weeks ago. And like I mentioned earlier, you have Pitt, who ever since they've benched Eli Holstein has looked completely different. And that to me, it really sets up for, I was talking with one of the guys that helps me with my show, and we're saying, man, November 22nd is maybe a de facto playoff to get to the ACC title game. Obviously, I believe that's SMU Louisville, but it's Georgia Tech and Pitt. And those are two teams that when you start to look down the common opponent list, you've got it. I think there's just maybe 1 or 2 common opponents. So that game means a lot. That head-to-head is going to play a pivotal role. So for Georgia Tech defensively, I think they've got to find a way to create more pressure, but also stay disciplined in their pass rush lines. That was something they really struggled with against C.J. Bailey, and it was just an issue for them. But you mentioned, man, does it hurt the ACC? I think it's frustrating for Tech fans. I've seen a lot of national media say, "Is it just a one-bid league? What does this league look like now?" It'll be interesting to monitor it. But Georgia Tech, to me, and I'm going to talk about this later today, because of the where's your quality win? Where's your big win on that schedule? Billy, I think they've got to go 11-1 to no matter what happens in Charlotte, because you go 11-1, you should be there. 11-2 should get you into the playoff, but that would include a win over Georgia. I don't think you can drop another ACC game. I don't think you can lose to Georgia. I don't think you could enter the ACC title game potentially with 2 losses, lose that one, and think you can get in. It's the at-large bid is that path is tricky. Of course, you as fans want to say just win out and don't worry about it. That also would work as well. But yeah, that at-large bid, the path got trickier after that loss on Saturday.
No question about it. And Bryce, we really appreciate all your time. Catch him on the Crowded Booth or on X or Twitter, whichever you want to call it, at Bryce, BRYCE _Koon, KOON. Bryce, thanks so much for the time, man. Looking forward to having you on in the stretch run, of course, of ACC football, closing it out here, and Georgia Tech looking to bounce back and all those things.
Thanks so much, Billy. Appreciate it, man.
All right, there he goes. Bryce Koon heading out for the day. Hope you guys are enjoying the show, All Access AM. We're going to be joined in just a second by our friend of the show, Matt Lasser, but do want to tell you about briefly a new partner of ours, SportsMo. SportsMo is a new app revolutionizing the way college football fans support their favorite schools. Go to sportsmo.org to download the app and learn more about what they're doing in the space. Really interesting stuff on how to gamify giving to your favorite school. So check out this quick video on what SportsMo is all about, and looking forward to playing with your favorite friends. Get on there, check out the app, download it, and just play around and see if it's something that you want to do and help support the student athletes at your favorite university.
SportsMo lets you make a more direct impact on the game because it lets you, the fans, fund your favorite college football teams in a straightforward way. In a you win and I'll give way. In a I need you to show me your running game is alive and then I'll donate way. These real-time tax-deductible microfunds lead to impact your team can feel. Every cent you send mixes with every drop of sweat they put in. Form your squad. Boost your friends when a play comes through. A new way to follow the game. And cha-ching, your favorite team. So what do you say, difference makers? Ready to power the play? SportsMo. Download today. Let's Smo.